of humans such as you and me in the very long term with regards to AI? What does our role become? And also, we often frame, because of the value systems, the US-China debate as a competition. But is there value to thinking about that in terms of a collaboration? And maybe more interestingly, you mentioned Europe being maybe somewhat disorganized, but they also have enormous strength and enormous talent, like Mistral in France and so on. Is there something to do there with collaboration?
So a couple comments. On Europe, I was the first investor in Mistral, so I'm a big Mistral fan. Mistral cannot raise the money that their US competitors. They have the same problem, and they're working on solutions to that. With respect to US and China, I started, because of Henry, I spent about 5 years looking at Chinese peer competition. And I thought that it would be possible to get closer to China. And I eventually, through his work and others, discovered that the Chinese were more afraid of partnering with us than we were with them. So it takes two to tango, right? And I think it's highly unlikely. I think you're going to see in your lifetime, hopefully, understanding that we have to coexist, but it's highly unlikely that the two systems will become best buddies for the obvious reasons. I think on this other question about what are humans useful for in the very long term, it's very, very clear that humans are social animals and want to be around other humans. It's also very clear that there are some things that we need, medical care and so forth, which will be delivered by humans. I think that it's a rough way to say this is most other functions will be doable by computers. Will we allow them? That's a question for your research, right? Where is that line? My old example was the following. This was back when we were building Waymo at Google. So the thought experiment is New York City is nothing but Waymo and competitor automobile cars. And the engineers at Google and the other companies have figured out how to completely optimize the traffic so that there's the streets which don't change. You have the absolutely mathematically true highest loading per street ever, and it's seamless. And then you have somebody with an emergency, a pregnant woman, or whatever, who has to get to the hospital and needs an exception. Is there an exception button in the car which says you have to violate all the rules because there's something else? Now, if there is not an exception button in the car, then that's dominance of humans by a computer. And humans will revolt. If I go back to the pickaxe versus religion, humans will fight that. That will be seen as oppression by the government, in this case, in the governor of the New York City, whatever metaphor you want, and the computer companies themselves. If the system, on the other hand, is adaptable to human needs and says, we have an actual medical emergency and not somebody who's high on drugs or whatever, who's just goofing around, or some kid who's playing with the buttons. And it reasons and it says, oh my God, I've got to do everything I can to get the person to the hospital, then it'll be more accepted. So a lot of this depends on whether it integrates with our human experience and needs. Does it limit our freedom or does it increase freedom? I've come to the view, I'm old enough now to believe that preserving our freedom of thought, of motion, of assembly, of gathering, all of the things, right, are really, really important. If they impinge on our freedom, then they will be fought, and I will be leading that fight.
Please.